The fridge hummed like it was the only thing left breathing in the house, a soft, mechanical sigh that filled the silence where words should have been. I sat at the kitchen table, elbows pressed into the wood grain, staring at the dent in the corner where my stepdad once slammed his coffee mug the morning he told me I was turning into him. That line stuck harder than the dent ever did. He wasn't my father, but for most of my life, he acted like he was trying to be. His name was Mark. Everyone called him Steady Mark, like that was his middle name. Steady paycheck, steady temper, steady voice. The kind of man who never raised his tone unless it mattered, and when it did, it could stop you mid-sentence. I was 10 when he married my mom, after years of watching her come home from the diner with sore feet and a fake smile. At first, I wanted to like him. He mowed the lawn on Saturdays, fixed the broken porch light, and brought home donuts on Sundays. The kind with powdered sugar that always made a mess, no matter how careful you were. But somewhere between middle school and the day I turned 22, something cracked. I remember the fight that did it. It wasn't cinematic. No yelling in the rain, no dramatic exits, just a Tuesday afternoon that felt too bright for the words that got thrown around. I'd found out my mom's house, the house she'd fought to keep after my dad left, was suddenly under Mark's name alone. I found the paperwork in the drawer under the tax files. His signature, hers missing. When I asked her, she told me it was simpler that way. When I asked him, he said, "You don't understand how things work yet." That line burned me from the inside out. Because it wasn't about understanding, it was about control. And that's when I told him, standing in that same kitchen, voice shaking but sharp, "I'll never forgive you." He didn't yell. He didn't even look angry. He just exhaled through his nose and said, "You don't have to. Just make sure you're right about why." It's been 3 years since then. 3 years of ignoring his texts. 3 years of skipping every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every Sunday dinner my mom begged me to attend. She'd call and leave voicemails that started light. "Hey, honey, we're grilling this weekend. Thought you might want to come." And ended like she was tired of pretending. "You know, he really did care about you." I never called back. Until last month. The call came in at 7:42 on a Thursday morning. I was halfway through brushing my teeth before work when my phone buzzed across the counter. "Mom." I almost ignored it, but something about the timing, too early for a casual call, made me answer with a mouthful of foam. "Hey, Ma, what's up?" She didn't speak at first. I could hear a faint hospital beep in the background, the kind that already tells you the rest before the words catch up. "It's Mark," she said finally. "He collapsed at the hardware store." I spat the toothpaste out, throat burning. "Is he—" "They're running tests. They said it might be his heart." The rest of her words blurred into static. I hadn't seen him in almost a year. The last time I did, he was loading lumber into the back of his old Ford, wearing that same sun-bleached baseball cap and work gloves that had seen better days. He'd waved at me from across the parking lot when we locked eyes. I pretended I didn't see him. Now I was sitting in my car 15 minutes later, hands gripping the wheel, arguing with myself out loud like an idiot. "You said you'd never forgive him. He might be dying. He deserved it. He raised you." The road to St. John's Hospital felt longer than it should have. The stoplight stretched into questions I didn't want to answer. When I got there, Mom was sitting in a vinyl chair near the ICU doors, holding a paper cup of cold coffee. Her eyes were swollen. She looked up and gave me that tight smile that only moms can pull off, one that means "I'm glad you're here, but I wish you'd come sooner." "He's stable," she said, "but they're keeping him overnight." "What happened?" "They said he was helping load something onto a shelf and just went down. One of the guys called 911. They said it was lucky he wasn't alone." I looked through the glass at his room. Tubes, wires, the soft flicker of a heart monitor. He looked smaller somehow. The man who once carried an entire washer up the basement stairs by himself looked like he'd shrink if you breathed too hard near him. "Does he know I'm here?" I asked. "He will." I didn't go in that day. I sat in the cafeteria instead, staring into a bowl of soup that went cold before I touched it. Every spoonful I didn't take felt like a confession I wasn't ready to make. That night, I dreamed about the house, about being 13 again, standing in the driveway watching him paint the porch railing white. He'd turned and said, "You know, paint's only as good as the prep. Skip sanding and it'll peel no matter how pretty it looks." In the dream, I told him I didn't care, and the railing stayed half finished. He woke up the next morning and Mom called again. "He asked for you," she said. "Said he wanted to explain something." Explain what? The forgery? The control? The years of pretending everything was fine while he quietly took over every part of our lives? I told her I'd think about it, and I did, for 12 hours straight, pacing my apartment, opening and closing the fridge, staring at the magnet he'd given me once that said, "Measure twice, cut once." At 10 that night, I grabbed my keys. The hospital smelled like sanitizer and burned coffee. The nurse at the front desk gave me a look that said, "Visiting hours are over," until I mentioned my name, and she nodded toward room 214. Mark was awake. Barely. His skin was the color of paper, but his eyes still had that steady look, the same one that used to make me check my tone before I spoke. He smiled faintly. "Didn't think you'd come." "Mom said you wanted to talk." He motioned to the chair. "Sit." I stayed standing. "You still mad at me?" he asked. I crossed my arms. "You forged Mom's signature and put the house in your name. What do you think?" He sighed, chest rising slow against the hospital gown. "You really believe I did that for myself?" "I saw the paperwork, Mark." He closed his eyes like he was trying to remember how to start a story he'd practiced too many times. "Your mom was in debt, kid. Deep. Medical bills from before we even met. That house was seconds from foreclosure. Her credit was shot, and if it stayed in her name, the bank would have taken it. I transferred it to mine to keep it from being repossessed." I stared at him. "You could have told me." "She begged me not to," he said quietly. "Didn't want you thinking she couldn't handle things." For a second, the air felt heavier than the truth itself. I wanted to call him a liar. I wanted to storm out and cling to my anger because it was easier than rethinking 3 years of silence. But the way he looked at me, like he wasn't defending himself, just explaining, made me pause. I sat down. Finally. "She didn't tell me any of that," I said. "I know," he murmured. "She wanted to protect you. We both did." I leaned back, staring at the heart monitor blinking in quiet rhythm. "You should have told me anyway." He nodded. "Yeah, I should have. But you were angry enough at the world already. Losing your dad, the fights, the bills. I figured you didn't need another reason to hate someone." That line hit harder than I expected. We sat in silence after that. Not the kind that feels like punishment, more like space that needed to breathe. When the nurse came in to check his vitals, I stood. "I'll come back tomorrow," I said. He smiled again, weak but real. "Bring me a coffee. The stuff here tastes like dirt." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his words, his tone, the way he said we both did. I found myself opening old boxes in the closet, photos, report cards, the baseball he caught for me at my first game. There was a folder too, one I didn't recognize. Inside were receipts and letters from the bank, all dated around the year he and Mom married. And there it was, a foreclosure notice stamped in red, "Final warning." The next page was a transfer record. His name added, hers struck through. And at the bottom, a handwritten note in his blocky handwriting, "For her. For him. Keep them safe. I went back to the hospital the next morning with a coffee from the corner shop he used to like. Black, 2 sugars. The nurse said he was sleeping, so I left it on. The tray beside his bed. He didn't wake up while I was there. Mom came in later with a blanket from home. We talked quietly, the way people do when they're afraid sound might wake the truth. She told me he'd been planning to sell one of his trucks to help me with student loans. I didn't even know he knew how much I owed. He kept the paperwork in the garage, she said. Said he didn't want to make a big deal of it. By the end of that week, his condition stabilized. The doctor said he'd need surgery soon. I started visiting every evening after work, mostly just sitting, sometimes reading aloud from the newspaper because he liked hearing about the construction projects around town. He'd smile and correct the articles, mumbling about how no one measures foundation depth right anymore. And each night when I left, the guilt clawed at me a little less, replaced by something heavier but warmer. Maybe forgiveness isn't one big moment. Maybe it's the slow grind of showing up again. A week later, he asked me to drive him somewhere once he was discharged. Just a short stop before home, Melissa, he said. When the day came, I helped him into the truck, the same old Ford he'd kept running through every winter. He gave me directions to a plot of land on the edge of town. "What's this place, why?" I asked. He grinned. "Yours. Well, almost." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He handed me a folded envelope. Inside was a deed, my name typed where his used to be. "You said you'd never forgive me," he said, eyes on the field. "Guess I just wanted to make sure you had something worth holding on to, either way." My throat locked up. The field stretched wide under a late summer sky, tall grass bending in the wind like a quiet kind of applause. I didn't say anything then, didn't trust my voice. But when I reached over and turned the radio up, he just smiled like he understood what silence was saying for me. That night, when I dropped him back at the house, Mom hugged me so hard my keys dug into my palm. "See," she whispered, "he always had his reasons." I nodded. Because maybe forgiveness isn't about erasing the hurt. Maybe it's about learning the whole story before deciding what it's worth. And for the first time in years, I didn't leave right away. I stayed for dinner. It was strange how fast routines returned after 3 years of silence. 1 week of hospital visits, and suddenly, I was back to picking up coffee at the same shop, parking in the same spot by the side entrance, nodding to the same nurse who now greeted me with, "Evening, son." I never corrected her. Mark was home by the 2nd week. The doctor said his heart had episodes, like it was a TV show he couldn't stop starring in. He had to slow down. No heavy lifting, no long hours at the hardware store. He hated that. The man didn't know what to do without a project. When I came by to drop off groceries, he was sitting on the porch steps with his tool belt beside him, sorting screws like they were poker chips. "Can't fix much with doctor's orders, Sime," he said, "but sorting's still allowed." I set the bags down. "You need anything else?" "Yeah," he said, smiling faintly. "Company." So I sat. The silence between us wasn't sharp anymore. It felt earned, like both of us had finally accepted that neither one was going to say sorry in a way the other expected. "Your mom said you've been helping her with bills again," he said. "Just a bit," I shrugged. "Figured it's my turn." He nodded, running his thumb over a brass screw. "You always were better with numbers than I was." I almost laughed. "You used to say math was just lying in a straight line." He grinned. Still true. Then he looked down the driveway, where the late September sun hit the hood of my car. "You ever think about moving back?" I paused. "To this house?" He shrugged. "Or near it. Your mom misses you. Hell, I do too, but don't tell her I said that." I didn't answer right away. The truth was, I'd been thinking about it. Not because I missed the place, but because I missed the parts of myself I'd left here. The kid who built model trucks in the garage. The teenager who pretended not to care when Mark clapped too loud at his graduation. But coming back meant facing the version of me that said, "I'll never forgive you." "I don't know," I said finally. He nodded like he'd expected that. "No rush. Just think about it." The next few weeks blurred into a pattern. Work, hospital checkups, porch talks. Mark got stronger, slower, but steadier. We never talked about the house again, or the deed, or the years between. It was like we were both afraid of scaring away whatever fragile piece we'd found. Then one evening, I came by and found him in the garage, staring at the old Ford. The hood was open, tools laid out in that precise, ritualistic way he had. "Doctor said no heavy lifting," I reminded him. "Yeah," he said, "but he didn't say no thinking about it." He handed me a wrench. "You still remember how to change a belt?" "Vaguely." "Good. Then you're the hands, I'm the brain. Don't screw up my reputation." It took us 2 hours to change that serpentine belt, mostly because he kept making me stop and measure twice. But the whole time, the air was light, comfortable. When we finally closed the hood, he wiped his hands on a rag and said, "You know, I used to think you hated this truck." "I did," I said, "mostly because you made me wash it every Saturday." He chuckled. "Fair enough." Then he added quieter, "This was the first thing I bought after marrying your mom. Figured if I had a truck, I could build a family around it." That line stayed with me all night. 2 days later, I got a call from my mom. "Can you come by after work?" she asked. "Mark's been going through some old stuff in the attic. He said he wants you to have something." When I got there, the attic looked like a time capsule. Boxes of photos, old Christmas ornaments, half-finished projects. Mark was sitting cross-legged with a shoebox on his lap. He motioned me over. "You remember this?" Inside were baseball cards, a few Polaroids, and a folded envelope with my name in his handwriting. "I started this when you were 16, he said. "Meant to give it to you when you graduated. Guess I missed the deadline." I opened it. Inside was a note. For the things I couldn't say right. Below it, a stack of letters, each dated, each one written in those missing years between the fights, the silences, the slammed doors. The first one started, "You won't believe me now, but I'm proud of you anyway." Another said, "I know you think I stole something from you. Maybe I did. Time, trust, that's on me." By the time I finished reading the fourth, I couldn't see the ink clearly anymore. "Why didn't you give these to me?" I asked. He shrugged. "You weren't ready. Maybe I wasn't either." Mom was standing at the top of the attic stairs watching us. Her eyes said she'd known about the letters all along. "I figured if something happened to me," Mark said softly, "you'd find them eventually. Maybe understand before it was too late." That night I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Not bad, just inevitable. Like the world was shifting a little to make room for what we hadn't said. The next morning, I stopped by his favorite diner, Carter's, the one with the chipped blue counter and the waitress who always called him Sweetheart. I grabbed 2 coffees and a bag of those powdered donuts. When I got to the house, the front door was unlocked. Mom was still asleep, the morning quiet except for the hum of the fridge again, that same sound that once filled the silence between us. I found him outside, sitting on the tailgate of the truck, watching the sunrise. "Brought breakfast," I said. He smiled. "Finally learned my order, huh?" We ate in comfortable quiet, sugar dusting our jeans. Then he looked over and said, "You ever think about why I kept pushing you so hard? All those years?" "Because you like control," I said half jokingly. He laughed. "Yeah, maybe, but mostly because I saw how easy it would have been for you to turn out like your old man." That shut me up. He leaned forward. "He wasn't a bad person, kid, just lost. And I figured if I could keep you busy, keep you building, working, learning. You wouldn't fall into the same holes. I stared at the horizon. You didn't trust me to figure it out myself? Maybe not, he admitted, but I trusted you enough to fight me for it. That evening, Mom invited me to stay for dinner again. She made her Sunday roast, even though it was only Wednesday. The smell filled the kitchen, wrapping around old memories like a blanket. Halfway through the meal, she got up to grab something from the counter, and Mark leaned across the table. You know that plot of land I gave you? He said quietly. Yeah. Your mom doesn't know yet, but I want you to build something there. Not just for you, for her too. She always wanted a little place by the river, somewhere quiet. I frowned. You really think I can handle that? He smirked. You're my kid, aren't you? That word, my, didn't sting like it used to. It just sat there, warm and heavy. A few nights later, my phone rang again. Mom's number. The kind of call you don't want to answer, but know you have to. Mark's back in the hospital, she said. They said it's more serious this time. I drove through red lights. When I got there, the hallway smelled the same, but everything else felt sharper. The beeps, the white light, the echo of shoes against tile. He was unconscious when I walked in. Machines breathed for him. Mom sat beside the bed, holding his hand. They said it's a blockage. They're taking him into surgery. I took the other side. The coffee cup from earlier was still on the table, cold now, sugar clinging to the rim. Before they wheeled him out, one of the nurses asked if we wanted a minute. I leaned in close. Hey, Mark, you still owe me a truck wash. He didn't move, but I swear his mouth twitched. Hours passed. The waiting room clock ticked loud enough to feel cruel. Mom fell asleep against my shoulder at some point. I kept staring at the vending machine, counting the lights. At 3 a.m, a doctor came out. It went well, he said. He's resting. You can see him in the morning. Relief hit like a wave and left me shaking. When I finally saw him again, he was pale but breathing steady. He looked at me and whispered, Guess I'm not done annoying you yet. I laughed, too tired to stop the tears this time. A few days later, I drove him home again. This time, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt lived in. He settled into the recliner while Mom fussed with his blanket. I was heading out when he called after me. Hey, I turned. About that day, he said, the one when you said you'd never forgive me. I froze. He smiled. You meant it, and you had every right to. I just want you to know I never held it against you. I swallowed hard. I know. Then he pointed toward the garage. Don't let that truck rust. She's yours when I'm gone. That night, driving home, I realized something simple but brutal. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It rewrites what it meant. Maybe that's what Mark had been trying to teach me all along. The next morning, I drove back to the land he'd signed over to me. The air was cool, the grass wet with dew. I stood there for a long time, imagining the frame of a house rising from the dirt, the sound of hammers, the smell of sawdust. I could almost hear him saying, measure twice, cut once. The day I broke ground on the lot, the sky hung low and gray, like it hadn't made up its mind about raining. I stood there with a rented auger, my hands raw inside borrowed gloves, the smell of damp clay and diesel in the air. Mark's voice lived somewhere in the back of my head, narrating every motion. Don't rush the line, check your depth. A house starts in the dirt, not the dream. I wasn't a builder, not really. I'd done small things, patched drywall, replaced an outlet, but this was different. This was a promise in physical form, and I didn't know if I could keep it. Mom brought sandwiches around noon, wrapped in wax paper the way she always used to when I was a kid. She didn't say much, just watched as I measured, checked, and rechecked the corner stakes. He'd like this. she said finally. I hope so. She adjusted her scarf, eyes glinting in the cold light. He'd like that you're doing it for both of us. I'm doing it because he wouldn't shut up about it, I said, half smiling. That earned a small laugh from her, one that broke just at the end like it was holding something else inside it. Then her phone rang. Her face changed before she even answered. Hello? She turned away, voice lowering. Yes, this is she. What? No, that can't be right. I turned off the auger, heart hammering. Mom? She pressed the phone against her chest, eyes darting to me. They said he didn't come to his follow-up appointment. His cardiologist tried calling all morning. Did you check the house? He said he was going to the hardware store. I didn't wait. By the time I pulled into the store parking lot, his truck was parked crookedly across two spots. The driver's door hung open a few inches, keys still in the ignition. My stomach sank. I found him sitting on a stack of mulch bags near the loading dock, breathing hard, one hand gripping his chest. Mark! He looked up, trying for a smirk. Guess I overdid it again. Jesus, you scared me, I said, kneeling beside him. Don't call the ambulance, he wheezed. It's just a bad spell. You need a hospital. I need 5 minutes. He wasn't convincing anyone. His skin had gone the same chalky tone I'd seen before the surgery. I grabbed his phone and dialed Mom before he could stop me. She arrived just as the paramedics did. The way she grabbed his hand, like she was trying to keep him anchored, made me look away. Stubborn old man, she whispered. He still found breath to say, takes one to know one. They stabilized him again, but this time the doctors were less optimistic. The surgery bought him time, one of them said, but his heart's failing faster than we hoped. We'll manage his comfort as best we can. Comfort. That word always sounds like mercy, until you realize it's just code for we're running out of options. Mom stayed with him that night, but she made me go home and rest. I didn't argue, though I didn't sleep either. I sat in my truck outside the lot for hours, headlights off, watching the outline of the foundation we'd mapped out earlier. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of wet dirt and old sawdust. I thought about the letters in the attic, the field he gave me, the second chances I didn't think people like us got. I promised him I'd finish what he started. 2 days later, he asked to be taken home. The doctors warned us it wouldn't be for long, but he wanted his own chair, his own view, his own silence. Hospice came in the next morning. I helped them move his recliner closer to the window so he could see the yard. He looked at me and said, "You got paint on your jeans." I glanced down. Yeah, starting the shed foundation. He smiled faintly. Told you, measure twice. Yeah, I said quietly. I'm learning. We spent most of that day talking about nothing and everything. He told me stories I'd never heard before, about his first job fixing fences, about the time he almost joined the Navy, about the dog he had as a kid named Jasper, who used to hide his tools. When he got tired, I sat by the window, listening to the hum of the oxygen machine and the occasional creak of the house settling. Hey, he said after a while, voice thin. You remember that fight we had when you were 17? Which one? The one where you told me I wasn't your real dad. I swallowed. Yeah, I remember. He nodded slowly. That was the first night I almost left. I turned to him. What stopped you? He smiled. Your mom said if I walked out, you'd never learn the difference between leaving and loving. My throat closed. You stayed because of her? I stayed because of both of you, he said. Even when you hated me, you still looked at me like I mattered. You have no idea what that did for me. He closed his eyes then, and for a second I thought he was asleep. Mark? Still here, he murmured. Just tired. That night I slept in the armchair across from him. Sometime after midnight I woke up to the sound of the oxygen line hissing softly. The machine still ran, steady and constant. He was gone by morning. The funeral was small. Just family, a few old coworkers, and the waitress from the diner who brought a box of donuts instead of flowers. He'd have wanted it this way, she said, setting them by the photo display. Mom held it together until the service ended. Then she leaned against me, shaking so hard it felt like her bones were trying to remember how to stand. "He said you'd know what to do with the rest," she whispered. I didn't ask what the rest meant until later that night, when I was back at their house. In the garage, taped to the underside of his workbench, was a sealed envelope with my name again. Inside was a single key and a note. "Toolbox, bottom drawer. Take it from here." The key fit the old red Craftsman chest. Inside was a folded manila folder labeled Lot 12, Transfer. The same field he'd given me, but now with permits attached, approved blueprints, bank signatures, construction licenses already prepaid, and at the bottom, another note. "Guess you're the builder now." I sat on the cold concrete floor of that garage until dawn, reading those papers over and over, trying to understand the scope of what he'd done. Every permit, every signature dated months before his heart first failed. He'd known. He'd been planning for me to find this, to finish it, to keep going. When I finally walked outside, the first light hit the hood of the truck. His truck. The one he said was mine now. I ran my hand along the dented fender, feeling the grit of old wax and dust. "You planned everything, didn't you?" I said quietly. The air didn't answer, but a blue jay landed on the side mirror and chirped once before flying off. Mom moved in with her sister for a while after that. The house was too quiet for her, she said. I stayed nearby, splitting time between work and the build site. Some days it felt impossible. Permits to file, materials delayed. But every time I wanted to give up, I'd hear his voice again. "Don't skip the sanding. Paint only sticks to honesty." I didn't understand what that meant when I was 13. I do now. It took 6 months to get the foundation poured, another 3 to raise the frame. By spring, the walls stood tall against the wind, beams smelling of fresh pine and promise. One evening, as the sun went down, I stood inside what would one day be the living room and thought about him sitting on that porch years ago, talking about family, like it was something you built from wood and patience. I think he was right. The night before the first inspection, I brought a folding chair and a thermos of coffee to the site. I sat where the front door would be and watched the sky turn from blue to gold to quiet gray. In my pocket was one of his old letters, creased from how many times I'd unfolded it. The last line read, "If you ever build something, make sure it's strong enough to stand even when you're not there." I looked around at the frame, the walls, the ground beneath my boots, and for the first time, I believed I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The inspector's truck pulled up right at 8 in the morning, tires crunching the gravel I'd spread over the new driveway. His clipboard looked like it had seen 100 construction sites and hated every one of them. I wiped my hands on my jeans and tried to steady the tremor that always came before moments that felt too big. "Morning," he said, stepping out. "You're the owner?" "Yeah, well, builder, technically." He raised a brow, scanning the frame behind me. "You built this yourself?" "Me and a couple friends on weekends. It's for my mom." That line must have softened him because his tone dropped a notch. "That's good work, son. Let's take a look." He went through every beam, every bolt, every code marker. The kind of man who could smell shortcuts. I'd measured everything twice. Mark's voice was still lodged in my bones, but waiting for his verdict felt like waiting for a teacher to grade the apology you wrote too late. Finally, he clicked his pen and said, "You passed." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. "Seriously?" He nodded. "Solid work, not perfect, but honest." Honest. That word hit me like it had weight. After he drove off, I stood there with the papers in my hands, wind moving through the open frames, whistling like a low hum through the 2x4s. The house wasn't finished, but it was standing, and so was I. Mom came by that afternoon, wearing Mark's old flannel shirt like a coat. She walked slow, taking in the sight of the house rising from the dirt. "He'd be proud," she said softly. "I hope so." She smiled. "He is. You talk to him every time you measure something." I didn't argue. She was right. I talk to him all the time now, under my breath, through my hands, in the rhythm of my hammer. It wasn't like praying. It was like remembering. We sat on a pile of lumber eating sandwiches again, just like before. She told me she'd been sorting through his old things. "There was something in his safe you should see," she said, pulling an envelope from her bag. Inside was a faded photo. Mark standing with a younger man I didn't recognize. They were in front of a half-built house, both covered in dust, smiling. "That's your father," she said quietly. My chest tightened. "My dad?" She nodded. "Mark worked with him once, years before we ever met. They built homes together for a summer in Alabama. He never told you because he didn't want to make things harder. He said it didn't matter how you got here, just that you stayed standing." I stared at the photo. Two men, same dirt under their nails, same quiet pride. For years, I'd imagined them as opposites, one who left, one who stayed. But here they were, shoulder to shoulder, both trying to build something that lasted. It changed everything. That night, I drove back to the old house. Mom had already turned in, but I went into the garage anyway. The smell of oil and sawdust hit me like a memory I hadn't unpacked yet. I opened the toolbox drawer again and found another note tucked beneath the screwdrivers, one I must have missed the first time. If you're reading this, I probably ran out of time. Don't waste yours hating the people who tried. The only thing worth building is forgiveness. It doesn't rot. It doesn't rust. And it keeps the rain out if you do it right. I sat there for a long time. Construction picked up speed after that. Neighbors started helping. An old guy named Don who'd been a carpenter for 40 years, a kid from down the road who wanted to learn, even the waitress from Carter's who showed up with donuts and said, "I'm no builder, but I can hold a flashlight." Every nail felt like stitching something back together. Some nights, I'd stay late, listening to the wind move through the open studs, pretending it was Mark's voice checking my work. Too much gap on that joint. Sand it again. Good. Better. I wasn't just building a house. I was rebuilding the version of him I'd torn down in my mind years ago. 3 months later, the roof went on. It was a cold morning. Frost still crusted over the grass. I climbed the ladder slow, careful with each step. When I nailed the last shingle in place, I looked out across the lot. The town, the fields, the faint outline of the river below. It wasn't just a view, it was an inheritance, the kind you can't put in a will. When spring came, I invited Mom to see the finished frame. We walked through what would soon be her living room, her kitchen, the spot where she wanted the rocking chair to face east. "This is the last wall," I said, tapping the unfinished beam near the doorway. "I thought maybe—" She smiled. "Go ahead." I reached into my bag and pulled out the photo she'd given me, the one of Mark and my dad, and slid it into a clear sleeve. Then I nailed it to the inside of the beam before sealing the drywall over it. "Now they both get to stay," I said. She didn't say anything, just wiped her eyes and whispered, "That's good, honey. That's real good." After she left, I stayed behind, cleaning up the sawdust. The sun had dipped low, catching the new windows just right so that the whole room glowed in amber. For the first time, I let myself think about the fight again, the night I told him I'd never forgive him. I could still hear the sound of my own anger bouncing off those kitchen walls. But standing there now, surrounded by the bones of what he'd left me, The sentence didn't sound like a curse anymore. It sounded like the start of a lesson I hadn't been ready to finish. I didn't need to say sorry. He already knew. That weekend, I took the truck out for the first time since the funeral. I'd cleaned it, changed the oil, even patched the dented fender. The seat still smelled faintly of his aftershave, cedar and coffee grounds. I drove out to the river, parked near the edge, and just listened. The water moved steady, carrying bits of light with it. I took out another one of his letters, the last one. If you're ever out by the river, take a second and breathe. You did all right, kid. I read it 3 times before folding it back into my pocket. Then I said out loud to the open air, I forgive you, Mark, and thank you. It wasn't loud. It didn't echo. But it didn't need to. The river carried it anyway. That night I sat on the porch of the new house, half built but full of ghosts I wasn't afraid of anymore. The stars came out, sharp and clear. Somewhere behind them, I imagined a man in a work shirt, leaning against a half-finished railing, nodding once before walking back into the light. I finished the house in late June. The walls were painted soft gray, the kind Mom always said made a room feel like morning even on bad days. Every nail, every board had fingerprints, mine, the neighbors, and somewhere in between, I swear, his. The day I hung the final door, I stood in the entryway a long time. The smell of pine and new paint was thick, clean, a little overwhelming. Mom's laughter floated in from outside where she was planting her favorite marigolds. When I closed the door, the click echoed through the frame like a heartbeat. Moving day came fast. Mom insisted on carrying boxes herself. Despite the cane she pretended she didn't need. If I stopped moving, I stopped living, she said, brushing me off. We unpacked in silence mostly. The house felt new but familiar, the kind of space where the walls already knew your voice. I caught her once, standing in the kitchen, touching the counter like she was testing if it was real. You did good, baby, she said. You did what he couldn't finish. That night, we ate takeout on the living room floor. She fell asleep before the credits rolled on the old movie we'd put on. The room glowed with soft lamplight, and I just sat there, letting it all soak in. For the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Weeks passed. Life fell into rhythm. Work, errands, helping Mom adjust. But some mornings, I'd catch myself glancing toward the end of the driveway, half expecting to see that old Ford coming around the bend, headlights winking. It never did, of course, but the thought stopped hurting. It just lingered, like the smell of coffee after you've left the kitchen. Then one afternoon, Mom called from the porch, her voice trembling. You better come see this. I stepped outside. There, pulling up the drive, was a delivery truck. The driver handed me a clipboard. Delivery for a Mark Caldwell, he said. I froze. He's gone. The driver checked the note. Paid in full, sir. Says it was scheduled months ago. He opened the back. Inside was a workbench. Oak top, steel legs, sturdy as anything I'd ever seen. On the side, a small metal plaque read, For the next set of hands. I stood there, throat tightening. Mom whispered, He must have ordered it before. I ran my fingers over the plaque, the cool metal warming under my skin. He never stopped planning ahead. We set it up in the garage that afternoon. His tools fit perfectly on the pegboard behind it, each one in its place like he'd arranged it himself. Later that week, I started fixing up small things around the property. Gutters, the fence, the loose window latch. Somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't doing it out of duty anymore. I was doing it because it felt right. One evening, while sanding a frame for Mom's porch swing, I found myself humming the tune he used to whistle when he worked. The same rhythm, the same pauses. I smiled without meaning to. Maybe this was what forgiveness looked like. Not a grand speech, not a perfect ending. Just the quiet decision to keep building, to keep showing up, even when no one's watching. A few days later, Mom asked if I'd help go through some old boxes she hadn't touched yet. We carried them down from the attic, dust blooming in the afternoon light. Most of it was paperwork, photos, letters, but at the bottom of one box, wrapped in brown paper, was a small wooden frame. Inside it, a photo of me at 12, holding a toy hammer, Mark standing behind me, his hand steadying mine. On the back, written in black marker, "First lesson, hold steady even when it shakes." I sat there a long time, running my thumb over the words. The house creaked in the wind, the sound slow and familiar. Mom placed her hand on my shoulder. "He never stopped being proud of you, you know." "I think I get that now," I said. That night, I drove to the river one last time. The water was higher after the summer rains, running quick and silver under the moon. I brought one of his old letters and a cup of coffee. Black, 2 sugars. I set them both on the rock where he used to sit fishing. "House is done," I said quietly. "Mom loves it. You'd tell me the trim's off by a 1/4 inch, but it's solid. It's real." The water moved like it was listening. I opened the letter. It was one of the few I hadn't read yet, dated a year before his first heart attack. "If you ever come down to the river, don't think about the fights. Think about the days we got through them. Forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. It's about who you decide to be when the dust settles." I folded it, tucked it under a rock, and watched the current take the edges of the paper, softening it. When I got back home, the porch light Mom left on cast a warm glow across the new siding. The marigolds had grown taller, leaning toward the doorway like they were waiting for someone. Inside, the house smelled faintly of sawdust and dinner. I walked into the garage and turned on the radio, one of those old static stations that played nothing but country ballads and half-broken ads for local car washes. The bench sat there under the light, tools gleaming in neat rows. I set my hand on it and said, "Thanks, Mark, for everything." The radio popped once, a flicker of static, then cleared. Now, months later, the house is lived in. There are coffee rings on the table, mail piled near the door, the kind of mess that means a life is happening. I still visit the river sometimes. I still drive his truck. And sometimes, when the sun hits the house just right, I catch a glint on the plaque inside the wall. The hidden one behind the drywall where his photo sits. No one else knows it's there but me. That's enough. Because maybe forgiveness isn't saying I was wrong. Maybe it's just whispering, you were right about some things, and learning to build anyway. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.